So first off, welcome everyone and congratulations on making it to Selection Day. You all have fought very hard to be here and we're all super excited to present to you today on how you can really set yourself up for success. So without further ado, let me share my screen as we have an exciting presentation for you all today. So all of that said, all right, so thank you again, everyone, and welcome to today's presentation on Selection Day and how you can really prepare. What are some of the things that you need to look out for? And then we'll, of course, hear more from our panelists later. However, just for some introductions, my name is Joel Vasquez, and I am a Diversity and Inclusion Recruitment Manager here at Venture for America. I go by pronouns he, him, and his, and I'll turn it over to my colleague Brittany, who can further introduce herself, where she works currently, what city she is in, and her pronouns as well. So Brittany, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, hi everyone. Excited to be here today. My name's Brittany, and I'm currently in Detroit as a 19 fellow. I work at a health tech startup called Work It Health, and I do business development work.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you, Jasmine.
Yes, hi everyone. I'm also in Detroit, but I am originally from Indianapolis, Indiana, and I work at Yardstick Management, which is a full service consulting firm. And there I am a designer, so that means I make everything look aesthetically pleasing and beautiful. And we wear many hats there, so I also do a little consulting work as well.
All right, everyone, you heard it. If you need Jasmine to make something look pretty, go to her. But anyways, Riel, last but not least.
Yeah, my name is Riel, and I'm a recruiter here at Venture for America, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers.
All right, awesome, awesome. And everyone who is attending today, this is something that I've seen a lot of people do, but if you all would like to connect with each other via LinkedIn or share that information in the chat, then you're more than welcome to do so. It has been something that I've been noticing throughout all of the webinars I've been doing, and I thought that that was just a nice little feature. So all of that to say, for today's agenda, I'm of course going to give a little bit of an overview in regards to Selection Day, what you can expect, and some of the structure. And then afterwards, I'll highlight tips and best practices that you can use going into Selection Day and what you should highlight and take note of. And then I'm going to turn it over to Brittany and Jasmine, in which they'll be able to share more of their story. And I'll be asking them different kinds of questions on their fellow experience, as well as sharing just general guidance and advice as well. And then I'll of course turn it over to Q&A from you all, just to answer any kinds of questions that may be lingering or that you all may be curious about. So with that kind of being said, as the presentation goes along, if you do have any questions, please feel free to submit them via the Q&A feature on this webinar. More than happy to really answer them, and total safe space. So no question is off limits as it pertains to these topics or the VFA fellowship. And so all of that said, feel free to use the Q&A feature and feel free to use the chat feature as you kind of go along with this presentation. However, aside from that, I think that kind of going to Selection Day, what can you expect? So virtual Selection Day is the final stage of the selection process. Now, prior to COVID-19, it used to take place in one of our VFA cities. However, just to respect public health and public safety guidelines and standards, we decided to make this virtual. And in addition, so that we could make it accessible to individuals as well. And so in terms of virtual Selection Day, what you can expect is that it is a full day of different group activities in which you'll log on to a Zoom room, and you'll be with 7 to 8 other candidates per group. And so there'll be 3 different activities with a break in the middle. And so all of that said, you'll be collaborating with these individuals within your room. And then after the morning, you'll then go to a platform called Remo, where you'll then hear more about Venture for America from our CEO, Amy Nelson, and also our community director of Miami, Brandon Mitchell. And they'll present more of what the fellowship program looks like, what does match looks like, what does match look like, and what does gaining a job through VFA look like, as well as things that you may be more curious about, like compensation, the day-to-day life of a fellow. What are we really doing in terms of COVID-19 and diversity, equity, and inclusion? And so you'll really get an opportunity to hear a little bit more about those particular topics, if not today. And so all of that said, after the morning group activities and after the lunch, you'll then go to a 30 to 40-minute afternoon interview between you and a facilitator within your room, in which you'll get a chance to really reflect on the morning activities, discuss more of your experiences and your interest in VFA, and ask different kinds of questions to your interviewer, as well as really get an opportunity to talk about your preferences that you indicated on the match survey. And you'll get to kind of share more about why you selected them in terms of your role that you could want to do in the future, some industries that you could be interested in, as well as potential cities that you might want to go to. So all of that said, in terms of really recapping a lot of the day, for the morning, you'll be in a Zoom room working with different candidates on group-based activities. You'll be treated to a presentation during lunch, and then for the afternoon, it will be a 30 to 40-minute interview. And you'll sign up for a time slot at the end of the morning group activities, just so we can be flexible with any sort of scheduling and whatnot. So that's kind of what the day looks like. And so in terms of the logistics, you'll log on at approximately 9:30 a.m. and that's Eastern Standard Time or Eastern Daylight Savings Time, 8:30 a.m. Central Daylight Savings Time. And so your link will be coming to you pretty soon, around Thursday, when everything is finalized. And so all of that said, I encourage you all to log in at 9:15 a.m., even if the Zoom room hasn't been launched yet, or even if you're in a waiting room. I think as you were kind of seeing, me, Brittany, Jasmine, and Riel, we were kind of working out some kinks with the video. And so kind of take that cue to really use that time to prepare yourself, make sure that your video is working and that your connection is solid so that you can have a smooth connection throughout the morning and a smooth experience throughout the day. And all of that said, make sure to eat breakfast to get yourself ready. I often find myself hangry a lot of the time, so definitely be ready to do that, and make sure to have lunch prepared nearby as well, as there is going to be a lot of information presented during lunchtime that could potentially be useful for you to really know as you're really considering the fellowship and VFA overall. So those are just kind of some tips in terms of logistics. So keep an eye out for that email tomorrow that you'll get that contains the Zoom link that you'll be clicking to log into your specific Zoom room. And should there be any technical issues on the day of, feel free to email selection@ventureforamerica.org. And that email has been the one mainly giving you your updates throughout the whole selection process. So don't be afraid to communicate with them if you are experiencing any hiccups getting into your Zoom room, so to speak. And so all of that said, in selection day, what are we looking for? And for those of you who have attended previous webinars, you're going to roughly get a lot of the same information, but more contextualized for selection day. So again, just to kind of reiterate, 3 of the evaluating factors that we're primarily looking for, that includes your mission and programmatic alignment. So even though you are really interested in starting a business or getting involved in the startup community, and you see VFA as a way to do that, how do your interests in our fellowship program connect to our mission at hand, which is to promote inclusive economic development within our 14 different cities by focusing on job creation through different startup organizations. And so all of that said, the hope is that 2 of our programmatic outcomes aim for you to either become a startup leader or a founder or creator of your own organization one day. And so all of that said, this is primarily your why VFA. And so how do your interests in our fellowship, again, connect to the mission that we have at hand? So really make sure to study up on our mission and make sure to really reflect on the why behind your joining the fellowship through our organization specifically. And so all of that said, the next pillar that might seem familiar to a lot of you that I've spoken to or that you've seen me talk about this is, again, that ability to contribute. So because startups oftentimes work in different small teams, they're really going to want to see individuals who can generate a positive result. And that really means being able to talk about your experiences and sharing different metrics within your stories. And that could include any stories that demonstrate growth over time or accomplishments from past experiences. So let's say that I was the president of a student organization. Some ways that I might be able to quantify those accomplishments could be telling how many individuals I was able to manage over a year, or how many events I was able to plan, or how many attendees I was able to grow my organization by. Let's say that I was working in a restaurant. Some ways that I might be able to quantify some of my accomplishments could be talking about how many guests I was able to serve per shift or how many tables I was able to wait. When it comes to handling money, how much money was I able to handle? So through really quantifying a lot of those accomplishments, we can further see how you're able to contribute to a startup organization, because that actually provides reliable data for us to use, given that it is a number. And so whenever you are talking about your experiences, especially within the individual interview, do make sure to really talk about those quantifiable metrics within your stories that you can really use for the future. And last but not least, we're really looking for that character piece. So again, just as much as we're looking for individuals who are interested in our mission and who know how to generate a positive result, we're also looking for individuals who have that growth mindset. So how have they used constructive feedback in order to better themselves? How have they used different kinds of skills in order to further their own improvement of their performance? And not only that, but are you a continuous learner? Do you value diversity, equity, and inclusion? And furthermore, are you a good team player and do you work well in a group setting? And so all of those 3 key skills or 3 pillars are often going to be enumerated and really emphasized throughout selection day. So just kind of keep in mind of how these play out and really focus on your YVFA, those accomplishments and stories that you have to back that up, as well as during the group activities, really being a good team player and really reflecting on what that could mean to you. And so all of that said, kind of transitioning from selection day, here are some tips, tricks, and best practices. And so I think first and foremost, we often see a lot of fellows or prospective candidates, excuse me, really go into selection day, often trying to anticipate different kinds of group scenarios and often really having rehearsed answers or rehearsed actions about how they need to be. However, at the same time, we're really looking for you to truly just be yourself. And so when you do show up to selection day, don't be afraid to be authentic in how you do work in group settings or in the sorts of roles that you like to play in group scenarios, as we really want to see you for you and not what you think we necessarily want to see within selection day and within your own performance. And all of that said, make sure to do your research about VFA. So for example, in really looking at the match preference survey, although you indicated those cities, you know, what kind of research have you done within those cities and why would you like to necessarily live there? You know, do you know our mission at the end of the day? You might be surprised at how many individuals might not when they enter into the final round and their final interview. So make sure you do your research about VFA on topics that you might not necessarily know too much about, whether that be on different company partners you could see yourself working for, our cities, different kinds of experiences that fellows go through in our program, such as training camp and match. And so all of that said, make sure to do your research. And then the third tip is something that I often heard in my student days when I was continuously asking people, what should I anticipate during group activities? And so don't necessarily anticipate the scenarios that we're going to give you. However, instead participate. I think that one of the things that I often see that often trips people up in these virtual scenarios is not participating in the group activities at all. And so even though this may seem like basic information, don't be afraid to contribute to these different group scenarios. And that doesn't necessarily mean pitching in or talking every single moment or every single time. However, that does mean finding your own way that you can contribute to the group and overall being a valuable team player that will allow you to find solutions towards a lot of these group scenarios that we're really presenting. And then in terms of interviewing, and many of you may have already used this specific tactic for your virtual interview, but use the STAR method for interviewing. And the STAR method is a framework that we'll really get to in the next slide, in which you can really tell your story regarding different examples that you might have on your resume. And so the final piece of advice is get rest and fuel up. Make sure that you set yourself up for success in terms of conditions that you may want to see. For instance, if you are presenting through Zoom or when you're logging in, make sure to upload a different background if you don't feel like displaying your setting, or make sure that you're in a relatively quiet place in line with the application toolkit that suggests that. And so from then on, just make sure to really set up your surroundings for success, and make sure to set up yourself for success as well. And so kind of more on the STAR method. The STAR method is really, again, a framework that you can use for telling your own story and telling different kinds of experiences. And so let's say that I ask you, hey, can you tell me about a time when you demonstrated how to bake a cake? So obviously that's a very hypothetical scenario. However, some of how you might answer that could be describing the situation that happened at first. So that could be, I was involved in a student organization and we had to raise funds. So I actually planned a bake sale. And then from then on, I was in charge of baking a cake. So I had to buy the ingredients. I had to really make sure to borrow my dorm's oven. And from then on, I went about making the cake. So I measured the ingredients. I got all the equipment together. I preheated the oven, because all of these things you really need to do in order to create something. And then afterwards, I was able to actually bake something and sell it at my bake sale and get more than $1,000. Obviously, I've never spent $1,000 on a cake, but within that specific story, you can kind of see how I applied the STAR method. So I not only described the specific context and scenario that really went into baking this cake, but also the tasks that I associated it with, such as buying the supplies and really equipping myself with the setting. And then afterwards, I took the necessary steps to tell what actions I did in really creating and baking the cake. And then at the end of the story, I told the results as well. So really closing with how much money I was able to really benefit the student organization that I was a part of. And that also told that specific quantifiable metric in the form of how much money I was able to really make for my student org. Now, let's apply this maybe to a student leadership scenario that you might really want to that you might instead use when you are interviewing. So let's say that your interviewer asks you, hey, Joel, do you think you could tell me about a time when you were innovative? So I might listen and really think about, okay, what competency is this question asking me to assess? And within that question, that is innovation. So what does innovation entail? That could entail maybe creating something new or putting a twist or creative spin on something that will allow a scenario to succeed. So let's say that I am a social media coordinator or a marketing intern or a marketing manager for a student organization. I might describe the situation as when I came into an organization, I was the social media coordinator. However, I really noticed that a lot of our followers and a lot of our numbers were stagnant. And so it was really up to me to generate different kinds of ideas that could help grow the organization's community. And so all of that said, I then went into researching the most popular kinds of social media tools in line with our organization. My organization was actually a professional development organization, and I noticed that we didn't have a LinkedIn page. So I actually went to creating a LinkedIn page, running it by the executive team members in order to really gain approval and generate content. And then I actually went to interviewing more than 20 of our members and existing followers so that we could actually create interactive content for the page. And this led to a 50% increase in the number of followers that we were able to get, and thereby increasing our exposure, our brand, and eventually leading some of our members to really take part in a professional conference that we would have otherwise never gotten involved with had it not been for my efforts. And so kind of breaking down, again, that specific example, I thought about the question, thought about what it really wanted from me, and then I actually described the situation, described the tasks that were associated with it, described what I actually did about the situation in the name of really creating a LinkedIn page. And then I also described some of the results as well, in that I was able to gain a number of followers, thereby really disclosing that quantifiable metric. And so all of that said, those are some of the things that I really want you to keep in mind as you're really interviewing within the afternoon and really describing and explaining your story to the interviewer. And so all of that kind of said, those are some best practices and tips that I would like to share prior to selection day. And now kind of turning it over to more Jasmine and Brittany for their own story. And again, like y'all, if you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask in the Q&A feature and let us know. However, I think just Jasmine and Brittany, why don't you start us off by telling us a little bit about your VFA story, how did you come upon VFA, and what that kind of looks like, and then we can go from there. And Jasmine, I think we can start with you.
Sure, yeah, I'll go ahead and start us off. How I found VFA was actually because I was researching fellowship programs. I wanted something long enough for me to be able to dip my toe in the world of adulting as I was thinking about where I wanted to go after college, but also something that would give me a lot of autonomy and help me create and make my own decisions. And within a startup, I'm definitely finding and learning that you learn so much. Like if you go to a Fortune 500 company, you may learn a lot about a certain vertical that you're working within, but at a startup, you are learning operations, you're learning how to run calls, you're learning marketing, you're learning every facet of a business. And that's ultimately what I wanted and what I am receiving from VFA. Another reason that I actually joined was because of a mentor of mine who started her own dance studio in Greensboro, North Carolina, where I went to school. And the pure impact that she made on the community, how she integrated Greensboro into her dance studio, really inspired me, and it kind of went along with one of VFA's mission statements, or credos is what we call them, which is creating value for yourself and others. And I knew that after watching her and her being such a strong mentor of mine, I knew that I definitely wanted to do something similar. But in order for me to do that, I would need that experience of actually understanding how to run a business, because there's so many things behind the scenes that I don't think that you'll get the opportunity to see if you were to go with a bigger company.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
No, absolutely, Jasmine. And I was actually just about to elaborate. What are our credos for those who might not know on the call? And yeah, what are they, Jasmine? Just for everyone's awareness.
Yes, the five credos are: my career is a choice that indicates my values. There is no courage without risk. Value creation is how I measure achievement. I will create opportunity for myself and others, and I will act with integrity in all things. And they all align with the mission statement of VFA. And it's something really good to keep in mind as you go and start your company. And I think that's why VFA chose the cities that they chose, because we're truly making an impact in these small cities and starting to create or starting to develop the economy in these cities.
Yeah, no, beautifully said, Jasmine. Tossing it over to you, Brittany. What's your VFA story?
Yeah, so I guess a little bit about my background. I was involved with a student organization at UCLA called Net Impact. It's a social impact slash business organization, and I ended up going to their national conference my senior year. And one of their keynote speakers was actually Andrew Yang, and he didn't miss the opportunity to plug VFA in his presentation, and he made that connection with the energy in the room, and in the conference room was reminding him of his fellows. And that sort of was what sparked me to learn more about VFA, just because the people I met at the conference were so inspirational and like really change makers, right? Like people who really wanted to see the world as a better place. And I was so inspired by it. And if you've ever been to a conference, you might kind of know what I'm talking about. There's just a lot of really great energy when you have leaders in the space all come together. And so after the conference, I looked into the fellowship and really fell in love with, I guess, the social mission of VFA, and
Yeah,
its mission to increase diversity in startups and also promote the cities, put some of these cities on the map that have kind of been forgotten or left behind. And I think also by my senior year of college, I knew I wanted to leave LA. As great of an experience as college was, it wasn't the city for me. I didn't see a future in entertainment. And so kind of having, the opportunity to join a fellowship where I wouldn't be moving to a new city alone, and I would have sort of that structure and support still as I, make this big transition into a new stage of life, I think was also very appealing to me as an anxious senior, not really knowing what the world would hold for me, and have been, really enjoying all the connections I've made so far.
yeah, no, absolutely, Brittany. So it kind of sounds like you were able to really get a lot out of a conference and a professional development event that really allowed you to get to know more about VFA, which I think is really awesome. And Jasmine and Brittany, I think that one of probably the top questions that I've gotten from a lot of prospective candidates has been what is Match? And what is it? What is the process like? And for those of you who are kind of new to the question, Match is what you all can think of as an internal job search within BFA. So let's say that you become an incoming fellow. Match happens in April of every year, and during Match, you as an incoming fellow actually apply and go through different kinds of job opportunities that we as the VFA team source for you. And so you're applying, you're interviewing, you're asking these organizations questions, and then you're hopefully receiving offers. And depending on the location of this organization, you are moving to that specific city. And so all of that said, that's a high-level overview regarding Match. However, kind of curious to hear from your own direct experiences, Jasmine and Brittany. So all of that said, we can start with you, Brittany. So what was your experience with Match like, and what was it like kind of choosing your role, the organization, and the city that you're now in?
Yeah. So I was on the quarter system. So I was still a student when Match was launching, and I was still a student, going through all the interview processes. But I remember when I first joined, I was really excited to just see all the opportunities. I think it really helps to have kind of a curated list of places that you can apply for. If you're a senior and you're actively looking for jobs, it's really overwhelming to go on LinkedIn just because there's a lot of these like entry level positions that require 3 to 5 years, and it's just very overwhelming to sort of filter down if you actually need that experience or if it's just a nice to have. So the really nice part about Match, from my perspective, was just it was all curated and very like all the job descriptions sounded like things that I was interested in, and I knew that there'd be a lot of growth opportunity just having, having the knowledge that VFA was like supporting these companies. And I think seeing companies that had fellows as well was extra encouraging to see that, other people are also sort of vouching and endorsing the company. My actual experience, I definitely prioritize location. Everyone kind of has their own strategy. Some choose to focus on industry, others choose to focus on the role. But I chose location. I kind of love the idea of moving to Detroit. I loved the idea of being a little bit closer to home, which is the East Coast for me. But, I still like the urban sort of grungy feel that Detroit had. So I was really excited and really applied to most companies, honestly, that were in Detroit. I think as a senior, I didn't really have any clear direction on what particularly I wanted to do. So that allowed me to be flexible in the other areas like industry and role. And yeah, that's my experience. It was really great. It was really hectic. I was talking to a lot of companies. But I think overall I had a really great experience. It was fun also talking to older fellows and getting to hear their experience in the company. And I think as someone who is in a company that has also talked and hired fellows, just having that natural affinity to your interviewer is so helpful, and it definitely puts you a lot at ease when you're talking in your interview.
Yeah, absolutely, Brittany. And just as kind of one follow-up question for you, since you did primarily focus on Detroit, what did you like about it as a city itself when you were interviewing with organizations based in that specific location?
Yeah. I liked, I guess, kind of the underdog nature of Detroit. I thought it had a really interesting past. I was an econ major, and so really interested in the economic piece, how the city used to be this major powerhouse and like, was really a center in the US, and how now it's kind of forgotten. And even talking to my peers in college, when I told them I was interested in moving to Detroit, I got a lot of like really confused and curious responses. And I think there was just something so intriguing about how a place could go from like one of the top cities in the country to, sort of forgotten. And then I think also my experience living in South Africa kind of inspired an interest in coming to Detroit as well, just because I did see a lot of like similarities in the two places, interestingly enough.
No, absolutely, Brittany. Thank you. Jasmine, what about you? How was navigating Match? How was that whole process? What are kind of your thoughts on it?
Similar to Brittany, I was on Match as I was a senior, so it was a very busy time for sure because I just wanted to prioritize all of the companies that I got matched with. But my strategy was different in that I actually didn't care where I was placed. The beauty and the blessing of Match is that you can filter on many different things. So you can filter for role, you can filter for company, and I just knew that I wanted to love what I was doing, but it didn't matter where. I knew I would probably make the same amount of impact just based on the cities that were present on Match. So I was excited about that. I also think one strategy that helped a lot when I got to the interview stages for some of these companies was that a lot of the people that are interviewing you when you get to those stages are fellows. So when I got into those interview stages and I found out who I was going to be interviewing with, I would, of course, take the stalking approach and look them up on LinkedIn, message them, ask them about their VFA experience, and that kind of allowed for us to connect on the VFA level, and it opened the door for me to like make connections that way.
Mm.
But yes, like Match I will say, like, it can seem overwhelming, but it is so simple in that once you get matched, an email is sent to you. And I think ultimately it's just about staying organized.
Mm,
I think that's like going to help tremendously when it comes to interviews, because you may have multiple interviews in a week. Um, but yeah, I think it's a wonderful experience in that there's so many different companies. All of the directors for each city take a lot of time and spend a lot of time thinking about curating these lists. So they definitely pick really good companies that are fun to work with. Um, so yeah, that's my experience.
yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad that you two kind of highlighted that different individuals can take different approaches to match in particular. We as an organization, of course, like individuals to look primarily like at the role that you'll really be doing. However, I do think that, again, like it is perfectly okay to kind of be a little bit more intentional and really kind of think for yourself, like, all right, like what kinds of cities would I want to realistically live in? What kinds of industries could I potentially see? And so I think, though, as long as you kind of approach it with an open mindset, like it can be really good and fulfilling. And all of that said, like I think kind of going on to a question from our audience member, but let's say that a number of individuals here become incoming fellows. And so Jasmine and Brittany, this individual asked, what do you recommend doing before April to get more experience slash prepare for match? So Jasmine kind of mentioned one in particular, interviewing different sorts of fellows to really get their sense and experience. So I think that that's definitely one strategy. However, anything else that y'all can think of?
I think one recommendation I would have is to make sure that your resume is up to date,
Mm,
and make sure that you have, um, in college, my professors would call it a pitch for yourself. So it would be like 30 seconds explaining who you are, what you're interested in, how you can do it. Um, but having that written down, because part of match is having a little blurb about yourself, what you're interested in, and what you want to do. Having that already prepared just for yourself, regardless of match,
yeah.
uh, is yeah, definitely like a great start, because I know that I definitely spent way too much time thinking of what to say. So having those things prepared and having your resume in tip-top shape
Yeah,
would definitely.
absolutely. Brittany, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, kind of adding on to what Jasmine said earlier about like staying organized to keep track of your busy schedule. I think it can help to just take some time to reflect on how that would work for you, whether that's, like setting up a Google Calendar if that's your preferred method. I use Trello personally. I know other people like to use spreadsheets, but like just figuring out what system works for you and
Mm,
can help you kind of when match opens, like get out there and not need to like reorganize halfway through the process. I think that would be super helpful. And then the other thing that I did before match opened, which I would highly recommend to anyone, is taking a minute to just reflect on what you're looking for in your VFA experience, what you're looking for in your company, and just writing it down on paper. Because I think when you go into match, it's easy to get overwhelmed with a lot of different options. And I think even depending on how late you stay into match or like seeing your peers get matched and you're still interviewing, like I think it's natural to have a lot of pressure to feel like you just need to take a job, or you just
mm,
need to um, be more flexible and like take some random company position. But I think it's so helpful to have like your values and your prioritizations written down beforehand, because it helps you stay a little bit more true to what you're looking for, and I think in the end you'll end up at a better place.
yeah, absolutely. And Brittany and Jasmine, kind of last match question for now, if you will. But if anything, one individual actually asked, like, how do interviews for match usually differ from typical campus recruiting or other interviews that you may have experienced?
I can go first, I guess.
Yeah.
I think from my experience, kind of what Jasmine mentioned earlier, but often the first stage interview will be with a fellow if the company has a fellow already. And so I think that can be really comforting to know that that person kind of understands where you're coming from earlier on.
Mm.
I think another way in which it differs is that it's a lot faster of an interview process. I know I had like 5 or 6 interviews with another company before I decided I wanted to do VFA. This was more corporate, and there's just a lot more people you have to get through. Whereas with startups, depending on their size, they can be really nimble and they can really move quickly as well. So I think having that shorter timeline as well with some of the companies on Match is a huge advantage for people who get a little anxious sitting on Match.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And definitely, I will say that because it is also startups, like Brittany's kind of alluding to, oftentimes the interview process like will very much like go faster and be quicker. Again, it depends on every single organization that you may encounter on Match. However, that has been the experience of a lot of different fellows. Jasmine, over to you.
I actually think the only difference that I really noticed was the speed. Uh,
Mm,
yeah, just echoing Brittany, it was, and it varied, just like you said, Joelle. One company took like 3 weeks, but one company after one interview um, was quick to hire. So it's just, you know, remaining calm and not making any split decisions. And I definitely love what Brittany said about writing down your values, because I was one of those people that was on Match until about the 3rd week of training camp. And I definitely thought about, taking the easy route and just having a job so that I would have a job. But I ultimately knew that I wanted to work in design and work with clients. So that helped me to decide what company I wanted to go with. Um, so yeah, definitely the speed is probably the biggest difference between corporate and Match.
yeah, you heard it from them, folks, the speed of Match. And so just to answer a few basic questions regarding Selection Day as well, before I turn it over again to Brittany and Jasmine, but from Will, who will be conducting the activities and interviews on Selection Day. So Will, this could be a variety of people. This could be either a VFA team member, or usually a VFA fellow alum. So it's either one of those two individuals, and you'll soon see on Friday, or if you're attending a later selection day. And so all of that said, Penelope, how are fellows evenly distributed across the cities, or do some cities have more fellows than others? So absolutely, some fellows do have, or excuse me, some cities do have more fellows than others. In particular, in Philadelphia, they typically do have like a large cohort because a lot of large company partners are clustered within that specific city. There are also different cities like Kansas City, which traditionally has had a smaller fellow cohort, but they are growing. And same for San Antonio, which is also growing. And this year, they have matched to 10 fellows so far. So it is very much distributed across a lot of our different cities, and often just depends on the opportunities that a lot of fellows from the incoming class receive. And so all of that said, the timeline between being offered the fellowship and actually starting to work. So you all are in D1. And this answers kind of another question in terms of when you can expect to hear back after selection day, but you'll hear back from selection day approximately 2 weeks afterwards, at the latest, in terms of your specific decision or with an update. And so all of that said, in hearing back, you then get approximately, let's say you do get an offer to be in the fellowship, you have about anywhere from a week to 2 weeks to decide on your offer. And so afterwards, you then go through a period of onboarding, and then April is primarily when you go through Match. And Match for a lot of fellows typically lasts from April to July, which is when training camp occurs. And training camp is one of the first programs that incoming fellows go through, in which they build different hard and soft skills in order to set them up for success at a startup. And so most incoming fellows then start their actual job within the next fall, or early August/September, if that makes sense. And so kind of tossing it back over to you, Brittany and Jasmine, but after match, you're then transitioning to the respective city that you are living in. So I think just in terms of like a little bit of a fun question, because I always think this is interesting, but how did you kind of go about finding affordable housing given the salary, since like the cost of living in different VFA cities kind of varies? And so how was that process for you in Detroit, especially?
I think the beauty of having training camp in Detroit really helped a lot. I didn't know that I was going to be in Detroit, but because I was in Detroit, I was exposed to other fellows who had been here for multiple years before me. So we opened up that barrier of connection that led me to know already three neighborhoods that I could have lived in. But also, I did a lot of research on my own. I was definitely on apartment list forever. Um, um,
Y'all, apartment hunting can be a struggle, so.
it truly is, and I think it's just the fun of adulting and being an adult. But yeah, like the fellows really helped me out there, the older fellows.
Mm,
And also, we have maybe the best community director ever, Sarah. She was awesome. She referred me to so many places, but a lot of it was just self-discovery and traveling around Detroit because of training camp. So I was lucky and fortunate um, to be in the city that I was going to stay in.
yeah.
For
Yeah. So Jasmine, would you say that you often relied on like the fellow community in order to really support you in finding a place to live?
100%. I think ultimately that is probably the third reason that I joined VFA, because I knew that the community was so strong. It is a complete network. You can always rely on the people within your city, but even on your community director, and even not even on your community director. I
Hmm.
still stay in contact with Cleveland's community director and Pittsburgh. I cannot speak. Um, so you have so much help within this community, and it's wonderful, especially after college when you're trying to navigate how to adult.
Yeah, absolutely. Brittany, what about you? How did you navigate the post-college apartment, I need to find a place to live struggle?
Yeah, I mean, echoing a lot of what Jasmine said, it's been so helpful to be able to lean on older fellows in the city to get a sense of like the different neighborhoods and sort of the different vibes in each neighborhood. Also, having training camp here was really helpful in terms of touring apartments and whatnot. I actually ended up finding my current apartment where I'm living through a VFA board member. We had a lunch with her, and I just mentioned casually that we were still looking for housing, me and my roommate, and she threw out a name and we just started touring and we really liked it. And I think I went to school in Los Angeles. I grew up in DC, so
Mm,
I'd always lived in major cities where rent is like astronomical and really absurd in a lot of ways. And so I think coming to Detroit was really refreshing. And I was like, what? I can have more than a closet for an affordable price? What is this? So I was pretty astonished by the Detroit housing market and easily impressed.
yeah, absolutely, Brittany. No, whenever like I'm introducing myself, like, and people are asking, oh, like, where did you previously live? So, y'all, I'm from Washington, D.C., and I moved to New York. And the way I like to phrase it is, I didn't think my rent was high enough, so I moved to New York from D.C. So that kind of gives you a little bit of a comparison point to really speak to. In terms of like these next two questions, I am actually really glad that they asked. So how has VFA adapted to COVID-19 in regards to sourcing different startups and job opportunities for fellows? And is there diversity in role type and industry type? And so I think kind of targeting this question, absolutely. So I think big picture, VFA has adapted adapted to COVID-19 by making all of our programming and converting them to a virtual environment. So all of in-city programming has been virtual. This previous training camp was virtual. And then different fellows and company partners are, of course, having conversations. And all of the fellows that I know are also starting their job opportunities remotely. Now, a lot of fellows are still moving to their own cities, depending on that discussion and their own comfort as well. However, that is what that kind of looks like. And in terms of like a different role type and industry types, like absolutely. So on Match this year, it honestly covers a whole gamut, all the way from software development to marketing to project management and operations, even to roles that are focused on things like venture capital, for instance. And so all of that said, there has been up to 338 job postings thus far, and our community directors are only increasing that number since Match is still going on for the class of 2020, since we started it a little bit later. And so all of that said, again, a lot of our fellows are starting their job opportunities remotely, and depending on their own level of comfort and seeing what COVID-19 looks like throughout the year, moving to their own cities, depending on the situation there. And so all of that said, Brittany and Jasmine, a question from Holly. What is one thing you wish you would have known before becoming a VFA fellow and starting your experience with a startup?
I think this is general advice for starting with a startup. Um, Really, it's just to take everything into perspective and really not. I'm trying to figure out a way to say this in a way that won't freak anybody out. I really think it's just to calm down and not freak out, because at a startup, there are so many things going on, but that's why you join VFA, because you learn about everything going on, so that when you start your own company, or even if you transition into a Fortune 500 company, you will be so much more prepared than a person who went into a Fortune 500 company. Um, and I mean that to say that startups, you wear several hats. So it might seem overwhelming at sometimes, but really knowing that you're not going through it alone because you have the VFA network makes everything so much easier to handle. So actually, my initial advice is knowing that you're not going through it alone, and you can rely on your VFA network to help you. Because most of these older fellows have experienced a startup for 1 year prior to when you join. So you can always rely on them for advice, figure out how to handle yourself in different situations. And yeah, just take things into perspective and slow down, because a startup is fast.
Yeah, absolutely, Jasmine. And I think that's particularly helpful advice, especially for a lot of individuals wherein like they might be new to startups, or a startup might be their first job out of college. And so I think that's particularly useful to gain some perspective. Brittany, what about you? Anything you wish you knew prior to VFA?
Yeah, I think I kind of wish I knew a little bit about what to expect with being a bigger fish in a smaller pond.
Mm,
So like I mentioned before, I lived in major cities growing up, and I went to a massive public university. And so I always kind of had that like small fish in a big pond mindset. There's always a lot of exciting opportunities, but it was always really competitive. It could be hard to stand out. And I think that's completely the opposite of my experience in VFA.
mm,
A lot of VFA cities, especially when you factor in VFA's network in these cities, you can definitely be a big fish if you want to. Likewise, working at a startup, if you're on like a 5-man team, like you're a big fish, like you're going to contribute in big ways and be really important. And like learning to like lean into that and step into that role is something that I've learned over some time. But I think I kind of wish I had that perspective sooner in my VFA experience, because then I think I would have taken a lot more risks and maybe different opportunities. So just acknowledging that really like the sky is the limit in a lot of ways, um, and there are just like so many perks with joining VFA in terms of getting connected and being able to have an impact if that's your goal.
Absolutely. And kind of transitioning from that question, and I really like this question because I do think it allows people to think on their experience thus far. But what has been the most surprising benefit of the fellowship, and what has been the most surprising challenge that you all have experienced thus far?
I actually think the most surprising benefit has been me or allowing myself to actually trust myself and my decisions. I love
Mm,
what you said, Brittany, about being a bigger fish, because a lot of what you do within your startup will have a major impact. And you might feel after coming out of college that you don't have the prerequisites or um, the experience to be making this major change. But the reason that your CEO or whoever from the company hired you is because they believed in you to carry their vision forward. And so, for instance, at my company, we don't have a CMO, but a lot of marketing roles are fallen upon me. And
mm,
I don't have 15 years or 10 to 15 years of experience doing marketing, but a lot of what I do is going to be seen without anyone looking at it first. So it's really just trusting yourself and knowing that you can do it and not having imposter syndrome behind it. And again, that's the beauty of VFA. You always have people to rely on because they have gone through this same thing where they don't have multiple reviewers reviewing work. It is what you do, and then it's, published for the world to see.
yeah, absolutely, Jasmine. No, I really like that in the sense of that when you're at a small organization, like your work truly does make an impact because a lot of people do rely on you. Brittany, what about you?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? Was it
Yeah, yeah,
big
yeah, of
to start with?
course. Yeah, no. So, what has been the most surprising benefit in VFA, and what has been the most surprising challenge?
Yeah, I think the most surprising, well, I guess they're kind of tied, but the most surprising benefit for me has definitely been the network.
Mm,
Like, when I was researching VFA and in the interview process, it's something I heard over and over again from people, but, it kind of was like, okay, whatever, like there's a network, there's people. It didn't really like click fully. And then it wasn't really until I came to Detroit and actually ended up changing companies within my first year of the fellowship, which was probably my most surprising challenge. I didn't think that I would be job searching again so quickly, but definitely in that experience, like really saw the VFA network like come through. There were so many fellows who were reaching out to me, supporting me, and just really like helping me in that transition process. And I think like looking back on it, transitioning companies is stressful enough as it is.
mm,
But like having that support made it a lot easier, and I think I just felt a lot more secure in making that leap, knowing that I had a community director behind me, I had older fellows supporting me and looking out for opportunities to send me. So it really gave me like that courage to move to a company that would be a better fit for me. When I think, if I hadn't had the network support, I honestly might have just stayed in the old company and like sucked it up for a little bit.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely, Brittany. And no, like, thank you for sharing that because, like, I do think that that is like sometimes a reality of people switching jobs during the fellowship. And so I think it is remarkable to know that there is really a community supporting you in that kind of transition. And so, last question of today, and I'll end it so it can be helpful for those attending selection day. But were there any particular ways that you prepared for your selection day that you felt improved your own experience? And so, without giving too much away, yeah, were there any particular ways that you prepared that you felt improved your experience?
Give me a minute. I'm thinking about
Of
it.
course, yeah, I know it's like also flashing back
Um,
sometimes. So,
I think one thing that really helped me actually was reaching out to previous fellows. I utilized that network before I even became a fellow, just because, like Brittany said, you, even before you like join the community, it's all over the website. It's completely like written in the mission that there is a network.
Mm.
So it was me just contacting previous fellows on LinkedIn and asking, what's the experience like? They definitely didn't tell me like the run through of everything, because I would definitely be giving away the experience, but they gave me advice on preparing for like doing a mock interview and having like standard questions or answers for questions like what do you believe in, and what drives you, what motivates you, what are you excited by, what takes away your energy, and just having answers for general questions for like a
Mm.
regular interview, but also making sure that you come confident and you come fully prepared to be yourself, because there's genuinely no right answer for selection day. There's no one way to be. It's really bringing your authentic self, and I do mean that in not a cheesy way. You just have to 100% believe in yourself and believe in the answers that you give.
All right, awesome. And Brittany, help wrap us up.
Yeah, so also kind of echoing, I guess, what Jasmine said with reaching out to fellows, I think that's a really powerful thing you can do. It's not something I did, but I have had a conversation with someone who wanted some advice. I think they went to another UC, and so we kind of connected that way. And then, most fellows, honestly, if you reach out to them, are just going to be excited to hear that you're interested in the program and will be more than happy to talk to you. So really encourage that step. I think for me, what I did do that really helped was like look for the fun in selection day. I was honestly, when I went to selection day, I was like pretty burnt out as a senior. I had gotten a million rejections from places and like just was kind of tired of the whole application process in general. Um, so like that's kind of negative. But I guess on the bright side, because of that, I was just in a mindset where I was like, I'm tired of being so stressed over this. I just want to like go in and like enjoy myself and like meet new people and like I don't know, kind of take the pressure off the day and just, like
Mm.
enjoy being, I did mine in New York. So enjoy being in New York, enjoy the experience, meet some cool people. And I think that really helped. It's definitely a long day. It's a lot to go through, but I think by looking for the fun, it made me walk away from the end of the day, like having felt like it was fun. And I think there are a lot of aspects to selection day that are really fun. And, being in the fellowship now, like, we look back on selection day and kind of remember those memories of like, oh, I remember when so-and-so said this to the question, or like, that's how these two people met and now they're best friends. So I think there's a lot of opportunities. And if you go in with that mindset that this is going to be a fun experience rather than a stressful one, you're just setting yourself up for success.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and thank you for ending it on that point, Brittany. And so just to kind of, again, display my screen and share a little bit of the last slide. All right, so thank you all so much for attending today. And please give some love to both Brittany and Jasmine for sharing their advice and their story to you all through the chat feature. And so all of that said, if you do have any remaining questions, feel free to contact us at selection@ventureforamerica.org. Again, that Zoom link is going to come to you tomorrow on Thursday. And so you'll get an email from this specific email address, kind of detailing next instructions. However, aside from that, just kind of wrapping it up and echoing Brittany's words, do look at it as a positive challenge that you can really gain a lot out of. And so many people who have attended Selection Day have really gotten something out of it. And I encourage you all to carry that same mentality that she was really expressing. However, aside from that, it has been great seeing you all today. And other than that, I will be sending out this recording so that you can look back on it. But, thank you all for your time and have a great rest of the evening. Bye, everyone.